to Discover You Radio's discussions. The full spectrum. The full spectrum. This is the show where we begin an artist's journey to becoming a legendary legacy. We believe every song has a story, and every artist's story deserves a lot more credibility than just being screamed amongst all of the saturated streaming services out there. Each episode, we put a single track under the microscope. We start by giving you a glimpse into the song's story with a brief. Then, our hosts, Robert Simmons and Rita Fox, guide you through a deep dive exploration of the song's artistry and the impact that it's left on Robert and Rita. But the discussion doesn't end there. Dakota Freeman and Lauren Miller take the stage for an intense debate, unpacking the lyrical meaning and arguing their unique interpretations of the story within the lyrical content. Together, we're not just celebrating music, we're building legendary legacies. Discover You Radio's discussions, The Full Spectrum, is proudly sponsored by Counterpoint Publishing and is directed and produced under the guidance of Will Stenner. Now, let's uncover the story behind the genius of this soon-to-be legacy after this short word from one of our sponsors. Are you ready for the musical experience of the year? Introducing the latest album by the sensational Andrew Neil in Code Purple, Resurrection. This album has everything you need, with its unforgettable stories and catchy riffs that'll have you tuned in and paying attention to the lyrics like never before. Prepare to be captivated by the magic of the title song, Blue Moon. These incredible artists take their mesmerizing stories to a whole new level. Dive into a world of intrigue and adventure with lyrics like My Best Friend is an Owl and The Bounty Hunter is on the Prowl. It'll have you lost in their powerful narratives and wanting more. Already destined for greatness, playlist curators simply can't resist adding Resurrection to their top picks. You don't want to miss out on the music everyone is talking about. So what are you waiting for? Get your hands on a copy of this unique and captivating album today. Resurrection is available for purchase on all music platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Play. Hurry up, grab your copy now. And remember, if you act fast enough, you'll be among the elite group of music enthusiasts who've already discovered the pure magic of Andrew Neil and Code Purple's Resurrection. Turn your nights into a Blue Moon experience and get ready to be part of the Resurrection Revolution. Welcome to Discover You Radio's discussions. The Brief.
This is The Brief on indie artist Austin Perkins and his breakout hit, Burning Heart. You know, Discover You Radio actually found him right on TikTok, and he totally cuts through all that algorithmic noise with this deeply authentic, raw approach to Christian rock that tackles real grief and spiritual struggle rather than just that surface-level positivity. First, let's look at why the song really hooked his audience. It stood out as a gritty anthem of repentance for the spiritually lukewarm, perfectly capturing his mission to make Christian music that kind of doesn't sound like Christian music. Seriously, think about it. Is modern worship music just too polished to handle the messy reality of human grief? Second, there's a really fascinating conflict behind that edgy sound, because it's actually built on a surprisingly refined foundation. Perkins holds a master's degree in music education, toured nationally with the vocal ensemble The Voices of Mobile, and currently works as a choral director down in Mississippi. It's honestly like a classically trained Michelin star chef running a gritty street food truck. So, how exactly does classical harmony elevate a raw rock anthem? Finally, because his music is so grounded in real human experience and years of formal training, he fiercely protects his authenticity by absolutely refusing to use AI in his production. He's literally in the studio right now tracking a full-length 11 to 12 song album slated for release in 2026. It makes you wonder, is choosing the hard, manual labor of music production the ultimate act of artistic rebellion today? Well, for anyone needing a spark of genuine faith or just unapologetically human music, Austin Perkins' upcoming 2026 project is absolutely the authentic art we've been waiting for.
Stay tuned as Robert Simmons and Rita Fox go into a deep dive as they discuss the genius behind this artist's song as we discover this legendary legacy together. We'll be right back after this word from one of our sponsors. Keep your adventures running with R&R Mobile RV Repair. R&R Mobile RV Repair services all types of RVs and appliances. They repair air conditioners. They service furnaces, service propane systems, and refrigeration units. Give them a call at 928-377-0271. That's 928-377-0271. Planning a road trip and need a safety inspection? They'll inspect your RV and make sure you're ready for your next adventure. Let R&R Mobile RV Repair give you the green light to go before you get stuck on the road. R&R Mobile RV. We keep your adventures running. Call for your appointment at 928-377-0271. That's 928-377-0271. Tell them Discover You Radio sent you and save $25 off your next service visit.
Right now, there is, I'd say, a 90% chance that the last song stuck in your head was mathematically corrected by a machine.
Oh, easily 90%, maybe more.
Right. Just think about that for a second. In modern music production, there's this standard practice called quantization.
Right, the grid.
Exactly, the grid. Essentially, it means taking a human performance, like a drum hit, a bass line, maybe a vocal run, and using software to snap it perfectly to a rigid mathematical timeline.
Yeah.
It's basically the audio equivalent of taking a beautifully handwritten, emotionally messy letter and forcing every single letter to align perfectly on graph paper.
That's a great way to put it.
It becomes neat, it becomes pristine, but in the process, it completely loses the subtle, uneven rhythm of the human hand.
Well, and it creates a fascinating paradox for the listener, really, because we've been conditioned over, the last couple of decades to expect that flawless engineered reality in our headphones.
Because it's comfortable.
Right, it's comfortable because it's completely predictable. But simultaneously, we're seeing this massive cultural exhaustion with perfection.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core question for you listening right now. Do you ever feel like the music on your daily playlists sounds, well, just a bit emotionally hollow?
A little too perfect.
Yeah, a little too perfect. So today we are taking a deep dive into the profound tension between that heavily mechanized modern music industry and raw, unadulterated human emotion.
It's such a great topic.
It really is. And our roadmap for this exploration is a highly compelling profile on an indie rock artist named Austin Perkins, and specifically his breakout single, Burning Heart.
And, it's a remarkable set of sources because Perkins operates right at the collision point of several massive industry shifts.
Oh, absolutely.
We're basically looking at a musician who is trying to navigate algorithmic discovery, rigorous formal classical training, and maybe the biggest one, the looming shadow of the AI revolution, all while fiercely guarding the human soul of his work.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what we are really debating today is what the word authenticity actually means when basically every tool in the modern world is designed to fake it.
Right.
And to really grasp that, I think we have to look at the exact mechanism of his recent rise to prominence, because how he was discovered is, well, it's almost a complete contradiction to everything he stands for musically.
It really is. Right, so let's start with that discovery phase. The profile details that Austin Perkins was found by a platform called Discover You Radio.
Okay.
But these talent scouts, they weren't haunting smoky underground dive bars in Nashville or Los Angeles.
Like the old days.
Right, exactly like the old days. No, they were scouting entirely on TikTok.
And I have to say, looking at the broader landscape, I will argue all day that platforms like TikTok are fundamentally democratizing and honestly saving the music industry.
Really? Saving it?
Yes. Think about it. 20 years ago, if you wanted to be heard, you had to get past this formidable wall of traditional label gatekeepers.
The A&R executives.
Right. The executives who sat in a boardroom and decided what was marketable and what wasn't. But today, TikTok is the ultimate unfiltered global open mic night.
I suppose that's true. You just need a smartphone and a song, and the audience decides your fate. It allows scouts to find these literal needles in haystacks who would never, ever fit into a prepackaged corporate mold. Perkins bypassed the traditional gatekeepers entirely. Well, I hear your point about removing the traditional A&R executive, and this raises an important question. Does making a short-form video app, the primary scouting tool of the entire industry, make the art form dangerously dependent on fleeting viral moments?
Meaning what exactly?
Well, when your new gatekeeper is a proprietary algorithm specifically designed to maximize 15-second attention spans, doesn't that inherently change the structural DNA of the music being produced?
Oh, so you're saying the algorithm forces artists to write for the machine instead of writing from the heart?
Precisely. The medium usually dictates the art.
Right, so they prioritize a catchy 15-second hook over a well-crafted 3-minute song.
Exactly. The pressure to create a viral soundbite often completely eclipses the desire to write a meaningful narrative. But the sheer irony of Perkins' success, at least according to the source material, is that he didn't succeed by playing the TikTok game.
Which is wild.
Right. The profile specifically notes that finding music that resonates on a deeply human level on that platform is literally like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, it's mostly just people doing dances.
Right. But his sound stood out immediately because his genuine vulnerability actively defied the polished, trend-chasing content that usually dominates the algorithm.
Wow. So he basically beat the algorithm by refusing to act like one?
Basically, yeah.
He used the digital megaphone, but he didn't alter his voice to use it. And actually, speaking of his voice and his musical structure, this leads to a really fascinating pivot.
Oh, his background.
Yeah. We just talked about how he was discovered through the most fleeting, short attention span medium on the planet. But if you look at his actual creative pedigree, it demands immense patience.
It is deeply traditional and incredibly rigorous.
Yeah.
Before pivoting to this current, alternative, gritty indie rock sound, Perkins was fully immersed in the classical and choral music worlds.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he actually holds a master's degree in music education.
A master's degree?
Yes, from the University of Mobile.
Wait, so he is coming from a world of strict mathematical sheet music into a genre literally known for smashing guitars.
Yes, it's quite the leap. And during his academic career, he didn't just study theory in a classroom. He traveled nationally for 4 years performing with a vocal ensemble called the Voices of Mobile.
Wow, okay.
And even today, operating out of Mississippi, he runs a vocal studio and serves as a choral director.
Okay, I am going to push back on how this translates to his current sound, though.
Oh, really?
How so? Because when I think of indie rock, when I think of the kind of music that has real grit, emotional chaos, and rebellious energy, I do not picture a choral director with a master's degree measuring out sheet music.
I get that. It seems counterintuitive.
Right. Doesn't rock music fundamentally thrive on being raw and unpolished? I mean, if you put a highly disciplined, classically trained conductor into a sweaty punk club, doesn't all that formal training, the strict adherence to classical rules, actually sanitize the authentic energy of indie rock?
Well, it's a logical assumption that overeducation stifles raw emotion. That's a very common thought.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of acoustic psychology, the exact opposite is often true.
Really?
Yeah. A classical choral background doesn't sanitize rock music. It provides a profound structural architecture.
Architecture. Okay, explain that.
Think about what a choral director actually does. They don't just teach people to sing on key. They manage the physical space of audio.
Oh, like arranging where the sound goes.
Exactly. They understand voice leading, counterpoint, and exactly how to use dissonance to build this unbearable emotional tension before resolving it into a harmonious release.
Oh, wow. So instead of just bashing away on a guitar and hoping for the best, he's engineering the emotional peaks.
He's entirely engineering it. The source notes that his deep understanding of vocal arrangement allows him to construct incredibly rich, layered melodies.
Okay, I can see that.
He is taking standard, guitar-driven rock instrumentation and applying choral architecture to it. For example, if you want a chorus to sound massive and triumphant, a choral director knows you have to intentionally thin out the verses to create acoustic negative space.
That makes total sense.
So the master's degree isn't a cage, it's a massive vocabulary. It gives him the technical tools to make his raw storytelling hit the listener's nervous system with maximum impact. He successfully bridges the gap, using the classical structure to support the indie grit, rather than suffocate it.
That reframes it completely. I mean, you have to master the rules of acoustic tension before you can effectively break them to create something emotionally resonant.
Precisely.
And this tension we're unpacking between polished structural training and raw, gritty reality, it bleeds directly into what Perkins is actually writing about, particularly regarding the specific genre label he operates under.
Yes, the Christian rock label.
Right.
This is where his artistic mission gets highly intentional and, frankly, quite subversive for that specific industry.
It really does. According to the profile, Perkins has a clearly stated mission to create, and this is a direct quote, Christian music that doesn't sound like Christian music.
Which is a bold statement.
Very bold. He is actively pushing back against the contemporary trend of overly polished, persistently happy-sounding worship tracks. Instead, he wants his music to deal with real grief, palpable hardship, and deep spiritual struggle.
And we see the mechanics of this perfectly illustrated in our sources analysis of his breakout single, Burning Heart.
Let's talk about that song.
If you look at the architecture of a standard, commercially successful faith-based track today, it almost always opens with an uplifting, joyful swell.
Yeah, lots of major chords.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Burning Heart does the exact opposite. It opens with a raw, spoken-word confession about losing focus and drifting into apathy.
Yeah, the lyrics they highlighted in the profile are incredibly heavy for the genre. He sings, I'm returning to a burning heart, back to the way that it was at the start.
Right.
It is fundamentally an anthem of repentance. And then in the bridge, the lyrics escalate into this battle cry, no more compromise, no more sleepy eyes, coupled with a direct refusal to seek external earthly validation with the line, no more praising man.
It's very intense.
It is, but I'll play devil's advocate here. Look at the faith-based genre as a whole. The entire intrinsic goal of that industry is to provide hope, right? It's meant to be a refuge for listeners.
Sure.
So if Perkins is intentionally stripping away that traditional, comforting, uplifting sound to focus heavily on grief and repentance, isn't he just alienating his core audience just to sound edgy? Like, does focusing on the darkness dilute the core message of the genre?
Well, the source material makes a very compelling argument that it does the exact opposite.
How so?
What's fascinating here is how the cultural context around the listener has shifted. We are currently living in an era defined by what psychologists call toxic positivity.
Oh, man. Yeah.
That cultural mandate to just smile, be grateful, and pretend everything is fine even when your life is completely falling apart. Modern audiences are deeply burnt out by it.
I mean, I am. Because when you are actually in the middle of a crisis, someone handing you a polished, shiny pop song about how great everything is feels incredibly dismissive.
It feels completely hollow. By rejecting what the source calls the lukewarm life, Perkins is offering a realistic, grounded soundtrack for people facing real-world apathy.
Right.
When he sings about sleepy eyes and compromise, he's acknowledging that faith wavers, that life is grueling, and that human beings are deeply flawed.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that shared struggle creates a much more intimate bond with the listener than presenting a flawless, happy facade ever could. He proves that confronting the harsh, messy realities of the human experience is actually the most effective way to reach a modern audience.
So it's not just rebellion for the sake of it?
No,
Yeah.
not at all. He isn't being edgy for the sake of rebellion. He's diagnosing a real spiritual exhaustion.
Yep. Wow. So he's validating the listener's grief rather than trying to instantly cure it, which is universally resonant regardless of what shelf you put the album on in a record store.
Exactly.
Everyone, no matter their background, understands that feeling of drifting away from their core values and desperately wanting to get back to the way that it was at the start.
Absolutely.
And this overriding, desperate desire to avoid taking any emotional shortcuts in his lyrics transitions us perfectly to the most polarizing aspect of his upcoming work.
Ah, yes. His absolute hardline stance on music production.
This is wild. So the profile notes that Perkins is currently tracking a full-length 11 to 12 song album, which is slated for release in 2026.
Right.
And as he has been working on this, he has drawn a massive, uncrossable line in the sand. He has been highly vocal on his social media channels about his absolute refusal to use artificial intelligence in any aspect of his music production.
None at all.
Zero. He insists on the critical, non-negotiable importance of human-made art. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I am going to argue the pragmatic side of this. Taking a hardline stance against new technology in music is historically a losing battle, and it ignores how art evolves.
So you see his rejection of AI as clinging to the past rather than protecting the art.
I do. I see AI as a tool, not a replacement. In a digital age, artists must evolve with the technology available to them. I mean, we talked earlier about how TikTok democratized distribution, allowing anyone to be heard. Doesn't AI democratize creation?
That's the common argument, yes.
Look at the history of musical purism. When synthesizers were first introduced, purists screamed that it wasn't real music because you weren't plucking a physical string.
Right.
When digital audio workstations and auto-tune arrived, people called it cheating. Today, they are the foundational bedrock of all modern music. AI is just the next iteration of the synthesizer.
It's an evolution.
Yes. It is a highly advanced tool designed to help an artist realize their creative vision faster and more efficiently. Why spend days grueling over a mix or a backing track when a program can help you execute your exact vision in hours?
It is a very persuasive, pragmatic argument, I'll give you that. Efficiency is the god of the digital age.
It is.
But if we impartially analyze the philosophy behind Perkins' stance, it challenges that exact pragmatism. Perkins argues that AI is not just a new synthesizer.
How is it different?
Because a synthesizer generates a tone. AI simulates the human generating the tone.
Oh.
Yeah, the source makes it clear. Perkins believes that the flaws, the friction, and the soul of a human creator simply cannot be replicated by a machine, no matter how advanced the algorithm gets.
But wait, this is where I struggle with the purist argument.
Okay.
If the AI generates a song or helps produce a track, and that track is so acoustically perfect and emotionally resonant that it literally makes me, the listener, cry, why does it matter if a human bled to make it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If the emotional output is the same, why does the struggle behind the scenes dictate the value of the art?
Well, Perkins would argue, and the source highlights this, because the emotional output is actually not the same, even if it mimics the shape of it.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about it like the difference between artificial vanilla flavoring and a real vanilla bean.
Oh, interesting analogy.
Right. Artificial vanilla is synthesized in a lab to perfectly stimulate the sweet receptors on your tongue. It does the job efficiently.
And it tastes like vanilla.
Exactly. But a real organic vanilla bean contains over 200 complex chemical compounds, tiny microscopic variations in flavor that a lab cannot easily mass produce. Perkins is arguing the exact same thing for audio. When a human plays a guitar, take 50 times until their fingers literally bleed, or sings until their voice goes hoarse, the final audio contains microscopic pitch imperfections and slight variations in tempo.
Oh, wow. The quantization we talked about at the very beginning.
Exactly. The grid. Those imperfections aren't mistakes that need to be corrected by an AI or an algorithm. They are the 200 complex organic compounds of human emotion.
That is profound.
They are the acoustic fingerprints of struggle. If you use a machine to bypass the physical and emotional friction of creation, you get a flawless, perfectly synthesized track. It will stimulate the receptors. But Perkins argues you have stripped the complex organic soul right out of it.
So the friction is the actual product. The struggle isn't just the process of making the art. The struggle is embedded in the audio waves of the art itself.
Beautifully said. And for an artist like Perkins, whose entire lyrical and thematic mission is about overcoming spiritual apathy, fighting through grief, and explicitly rejecting shortcuts in life, using algorithmic shortcuts in his production would be a profound contradiction.
Yeah, it would make him a hypocrite.
Exactly. His grueling dedication to manual human-made art ensures that when this 2026 album drops, it'll be a genuine, unquantized reflection of his life, his faith, and his raw talent.
So what does this all mean?
It's a lot to process.
It really is. When we zoom out and look at all these pieces together, Austin Perkins represents this incredibly fascinating rebellion against modern convenience.
A complete rebellion.
He is a walking juxtaposition. I mean, he was discovered on an app entirely driven by fleeting algorithms, yet he succeeded by defying those algorithms with patient, raw honesty.
Right.
He possesses a highly structured, rigorous classical education, but he leverages it to create gritty, emotionally volatile rock.
Exactly.
He operates squarely under a traditional genre label, but he is actively subverting its norms to validate human grief instead of forcing toxic joy. And now, as the entire industry races toward a frictionless, AI-generated future, he is drawing a hard line in the sand to say that human error and human struggle actually matter.
He is deliberately choosing the difficult path at every single intersection of his career.
Every single one.
And that deliberate choice is precisely why his music is resonating so deeply with listeners who are, frankly, subconsciously exhausted by engineered reality.
And this is where we turn it back to you, the listener. The next time you put on your headphones, I want you to really listen to your playlist and ask yourself a question.
Tough question.
When you are going through a difficult time, when you are navigating your own grief, or when you are desperately seeking your own burning heart to find your way back to your core values, what do you actually need to hear?
Yeah.
Do you want the flawless, mathematical, friction-free perfection generated by an algorithm? Or do you need the flawed, beautifully uneven soul of a human being singing their struggle back to you?
And that leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on.
Lay it on us.
As technology continues its exponential march forward, AI is inevitably going to evolve.
Of course.
It will eventually learn how to artificially manufacture the sound of a struggling human. It will mathematically program that authentic acoustic guitar squeak or synthesize that slight emotional crack in a vocalist's range.
That's slightly terrifying.
It is. So when that day arrives and the artificial vanilla becomes entirely indistinguishable from the real being, will we eventually need a digital watermark to prove a song actually has a human soul behind it?
Wow.
Or will we, as an audience, simply stop caring where the music comes from as long as the illusion makes us feel something?
A digital watermark to prove human existence in art. That is a heavy, lingering thought to leave on. Keep a close watch on Austin Perkins and the tracking of that 2026 album. Until next time, keep digging deep.
Stay tuned for Dakota Freeman and Lauren Miller as they get into an intense debate regarding the subject matter of this artist's masterpiece, as they give two separate opinions helping to build this legendary legacy. We'll be right back after this word from one of our sponsors.
Coming soon is a collection of micro-stories, some fictional and some not so fictional. Events of an ordinary life, written by the master of micro-stories, Frank Conrad Musumeci. Each story will leave you in suspense and wondering, did this really happen? Or is this made up? Leaving you at the edge of your seat will be an understatement. Because once you start reading events of an ordinary life, you will be floored.
Welcome to The Debate. What if I told you the most authentic, emotionally raw indie rock track of the year, a song entirely about spiritual burnout, was mathematically engineered by a classical choral director and distributed by a machine learning algorithm?
I'd say that sounds like a massive contradiction just waiting to collapse on itself.
Right. But that is exactly the strange, fascinating landscape we're looking at today. We're exploring the intersection of technology, classical pedigree, and raw authenticity in the modern music industry.
Specifically, we're looking at this through the lens of a recent profile on independent artist Austin Perkins, focusing on his breakout track, Burning Heart, and, his discovery by Discovery Radio, plus his upcoming 11 to 12 song album slated for 2026.
Exactly. And I believe that in our digital age, an artist's ability to evolve alongside technology and utilize formal structural polish is absolutely essential to effectively distribute their message.
Well, and I believe that Austin Perkins actually proves the exact opposite. He proves that an uncompromising commitment to raw, purely human-made art, complete with its glaring flaws, is the only authentic way to preserve the soul and emotion of music in an increasingly artificial world.
Let me lay out exactly why I see Perkins' trajectory as a triumph of structure and evolution. While raw emotion is undeniably vital to any artistic endeavor, the modern industry demands more than just feeling. It demands execution.
Sure, execution matters.
Right, and it is incredibly ironic, and brilliantly so, that Perkins' success is fueled on one side by algorithmic technological distribution through TikTok, and on the other side, by an elite classical pedigree. I mean, he holds a master's in music education from the University of Mobile.
He does, yeah.
He toured nationally with the Voices of Mobile, utilizing modern digital tools and highly formal academic structures doesn't dilute his art. It acts as a necessary, highly calibrated amplifier for his core message of spiritual renewal.
See, I think the true driver of Perkins' resonance isn't his academic pedigree or the algorithms that happen to host his files on a server. It is his radical vulnerability and his explicit outright rejection of artificiality.
But the tools...
Let me finish. Perkins takes a hardline stance against artificial intelligence and insists on purely human-made art because platforms and pedigrees are entirely secondary. What actually connects with the listener in tracks like Burning Heart is the unfiltered human grief. Yes, but...
It's the struggle. It's the imperfections in a spoken word confession. If you over-prioritize the polish and the technology, you actively strip away the very humanity that makes the music worth listening to in the first place.
If you're listening to this and wondering how a classically trained choral director ends up creating an emotionally volatile indie rock anthem, you're not alone. At first glance, the two worlds just don't make sense together. But let's look closely at the mechanics of how that raw feeling is actually achieved.
Okay, let's look at it. My position is that this classical pedigree is precisely what elevates his rock instrumentation. Think of it like a master architect building a deliberately rustic cabin. The cabin feels raw, it feels natural, it feels spontaneous. But that aesthetic is only possible because it is supported by an elite, highly educated structural integrity beneath the floorboards.
I'll give you the architect analogy, but here's where it falls apart for me. It assumes that rock music is supposed to be structurally perfect beneath the surface. I question whether rock music loses its essential nature when it is overly structured by someone whose professional title is literally choral director.
I don't see why it would.
Because rock, historically, is born from rebellion. It is fundamentally about unresolved tension. And the stated goal of Burning Heart is to be a battle cry against apathy.
Right, but the battle cry doesn't work if the listener can't decipher the sonic information. When you have heavy, distorted electric guitars, they eat up the entire mid-range of the frequency spectrum.
That's just the genre, though.
Yeah, but if an untrained vocalist just screams over that, it turns into auditory mud. Someone with a master's in music education understands the rigorous mathematics of vocal arrangement. Perkins knows exactly how to voice his background vocals in the extreme highs and the sub-lows.
Creating a pocket, yeah.
Exactly. He creates a perfectly carved-out pocket in the mix for that spoken word confession to sit. The rich, layered choral arrangements he employs are what actually make the rock elements hit with such force.
But at what cost? When you apply a choral director's approach, which is fundamentally about resolving dissonance into perfect harmony, like the classic Vita-I cadence, you risk something. You risk inadvertently sanitizing the visceral, bleeding reality of that battle cry.
Sanitizing it? I completely disagree.
The danger of a master's degree in music education is that it teaches you the correct way to resolve a chord. But human grief and spiritual lukewarmness don't resolve correctly. They are messy, they linger.
I don't think he's sanitizing the grief at all. He's just giving it a structural foundation so it doesn't just dissipate into noise. Which naturally forces us to look at how this highly structured yet emotionally raw music is categorized. Because stripping away the standard sounds of a genre creates a massive problem for an artist.
It does, especially in his space.
Right. Perkins is on a mission to create Christian music that doesn't sound like Christian music. He is actively bypassing the overly polished, perpetually happy worship tracks to focus on real hardship. I mean, Burning Heart opens with a raw confession of losing faith.
It does.
By shedding the traditional sonic tropes of Christian music, the soaring, predictable synth pads and the neatly packaged lyrical resolutions, he bypasses the prejudices of listeners.
You're giving him way too much credit for shedding those tropes. Have you considered the inherent contradiction in that strategy?
How is it a contradiction to reach people where they are?
Because you are praising him for abandoning the sound of his own genre to reach a new audience. But let's look at the actual lyrics of Burning Heart. The bridge builds to this immense emotional resonance where he says, "I'm returning to a burning heart, back to the way that it was at the start."
Yeah, it's a powerful moment.
And crucially, he says no more compromise. He is declaring an absolute end to halfway commitments. So I have to ask, If the entire message of your music is about an uncompromising faith, is masking the genre itself a form of compromise?
Not at all. Changing a delivery mechanism isn't the same as compromising the core truth. Let's talk about cultural signifiers in audio production. Traditional Christian music has become a sonic gated community.
A gated community?
Yes. It uses specific auditory cues, like pristine vocal processing, bright acoustic guitars, to signal safety to its core demographic. Perkins isn't masking his message, he's leaving the gated community. I would argue that a spoken word confession over distorted indie rock instrumentation is a vastly more accurate sonic representation of actual human grief than a polished four-chord worship song.
But genre isn't just a delivery mechanism. It is an identity. When an artist actively tries to avoid sounding like the community they are speaking to, they risk alienating their core audience. And they do it just to chase a demographic that might only engage with the aesthetic, not the theology.
I think listeners are smarter than that.
He is singing about repentance and returning to a centered spiritual life. If you dress that up in the clothing of secular indie rock specifically to trick the ear of a disillusioned listener, you are engaging in a marketing tactic. And marketing tactics are by definition a compromise of raw expression in favor of calculated reception.
But stripping away that traditional packaging means traditional Christian radio won't play his music. The gatekeepers at the local stations aren't going to spin a spoken word indie rock confession.
Well, no, of course not.
So where does an uncategorized artist actually go to get heard? They are forced onto meritocratic platforms. And this is exactly how Discover You Radio found Perkins while they were talent scouting on TikTok. This proves that the platform is an unparalleled testing ground.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious. I champion platforms like TikTok for literally saving the music industry. It completely democratizes discovery. The old record executives in boardrooms deciding what fits a radio format are gone. Instead, scouts can find these needles in haystacks based entirely on merit and direct audience connection.
I have to stop you there because calling TikTok a pure meritocracy fundamentally misunderstands how algorithms function. It doesn't democratize discovery. It just shifts the gatekeeping from human record executives to machine learning algorithms. And those algorithms are optimized strictly for one thing, and that is user retention.
But retention means people like the music.
No. Retention means the app hacked your attention span. It makes the entire music industry dangerously dependent on viral moments rather than lasting artistry. Think about the mechanics of how songs are written now because of TikTok.
It's just a different format.
It's destructive. Artists are actively pressured to structurally alter their music, forcing a massive, catchy hook into the first 3 seconds of a track just to stop someone from scrolling. That completely destroys the concept of a slow build, of setting a theme, or of building emotional tension.
But Perkins didn't do that. Burning Heart is a slow burn. It literally opens with spoken word. He proved that you can succeed on the platform without compromising the structure of the art.
Exactly. He succeeded in spite of the algorithm, not because the algorithm is a healthy meritocracy. Look at the lyrics again. No more sleepy eyes, and crucially, no more praising man. He is explicitly rejecting the validation of the crowd. Right, but a slow build confession is the exact opposite of an algorithm-chasing dopamine hit. The fact that Discover You Radio found him on TikTok doesn't validate TikTok. It validates Perkins' immense, undeniable talent. His raw vulnerability stood out precisely because it was surrounded by a sea of artificial, calculated content. Relying on a viral casino to sustain a career built on deep, slow-burn spiritual renewal is an incredibly precarious foundation.
It may be precarious, but it is the reality of the modern distribution landscape. The tool exists, and ignoring it means silencing your own message, which forces us to confront a much more uncomfortable question.
Let's hear it.
If we accept that algorithms are the only viable way to distribute this uncategorized music at scale, should algorithms dictate the creation of the music? Perkins is currently tracking his 2026 album, and he has made a highly vocal, absolute refusal on social media to use artificial intelligence in his production.
As well he should.
He insists strictly on human flaws and human soul. Now, as someone who champions his classical training and his use of modern distribution, I have to push back hard on this. Outright refusing AI in a digital age is exactly like a 20th century musician refusing to use a synthesizer or a drum machine or even a multi-track recording console.
A synthesizer doesn't write the melody for you. It doesn't generate the emotion out of thin air.
Neither does AI if it's used by a master craftsman. Let's break down the mechanics of what AI actually is in an audio production context. It is a complex algorithm for manipulating sound waves. It's a tool.
It's more than just a tool.
No, think about it. If Perkins needs a massive echoing choir for the bridge of a new song, why should he spend 60 hours manually tracking 50 different vocal stems? He could use an AI chorus plugin to instantly generate that choral texture and then explicitly guide, curate, and layer that texture to express his own spiritual journey.
Because that defeats the entire purpose of his art.
It frees up his creative energy for the actual songwriting. It doesn't inherently erase the artist's soul if the human is still the author. Refusing it entirely feels like a performative rejection of progress.
I couldn't disagree more strongly, and I will defend Perkins' stance to the absolute limit here. You keep calling it a tool, comparing it to a synthesizer. But a synthesizer is an instrument that responds directly to the physical touch, the velocity, and the mathematical input of the human playing it.
And an AI prompt responds to human input.
Generative AI is not an instrument, it is an aggregator. It scrapes the average of human emotion from a database of pre-existing art and simply mimics it. And when we are talking about a song like Burning Heart, the stakes are entirely different. AI might be able to mathematically mimic the acoustic properties of a burning heart, but a machine has never experienced spiritual lukewarmness. A machine has never felt grief. A machine cannot repent.
But let's be incredibly practical for a second. Does the listener's ear actually care? If an AI-modulated reverb tail perfectly simulates the acoustic emptiness of a cathedral, and that sound makes a teenager in their bedroom cry and reconnect with their faith, hasn't the tool achieved its spiritual goal regardless of its binary origins?
The listener's subconscious absolutely knows the difference. And even if they couldn't articulate why, the integrity of the art demands the human element. You are viewing music production as a mechanical hurdle to be cleared as efficiently as possible so the product can be distributed. Perkins views the labor as the liturgy.
The labor as the liturgy? Explain what you mean by that.
Think about the historical context of religious art. Monks spending years physically illuminating manuscripts by hand. The physical effort wasn't just a means to an end. The sacrifice of time and physical energy imbued the final product with spiritual weight.
Okay, I see where you're going.
It's the difference between buying a mass-produced machine-cut table and a table hand-carved by a carpenter. They both hold your dinner perfectly well, but one contains the time, the sweat, and the humanity of its maker. When Perkins chooses to physically breathe into a microphone 50 times to stack a choir rather than clicking a button, that temporal commitment gives the music its soul.
That is a very romantic way to look at studio time.
It's the truth. When his voice wavers during that spoken word confession, that microtonal imperfection is the literal sound of a human soul wrestling with its own frailty. AI seeks to eliminate frailty. Perkins believes that human-made art is the only way to establish the genuine emotional intimacy that listeners are desperately craving in this increasingly automated industry.
I completely understand the romance in that perspective. But look at the broader implications for an independent artist making an 11 to 12 song album for 2026. If he relies entirely on manual labor for every aspect of production, he is drastically limiting his output.
Maybe output isn't the most important thing.
In a landscape where platforms demand constant engagement just to keep your head above water, an artist's ability to utilize technological shortcuts allows them to survive. The soul isn't in the manual labor of hitting the record button and tracking a backing vocal for the 20th time. The soul is in the initial creative spark. The tools just get that spark out to the world faster.
And I maintain that when shortcuts are easily accessible, choosing the hard work of writing, tracking, and producing real music is in itself an act of rebellion. It proves to the listener that the grief is real, the struggle is real, and the renewal is real. If the process is artificial, the empathy it generates is built on a lie.
Well, that brings us to the core tension we've been dancing around this entire discussion. We've navigated through the architecture of Austin Perkins' music, from the complex vocal arrangements born of his classical roots at the University of Mobile, to his breakout success bypassing traditional gatekeepers with Discover You Radio on TikTok.
Right.
My position remains that structure, elite classical training, technological adoption, and modern platforms are the necessary vessels. They are the calculated engineering that allows profound, raw messages like Burning Heart to be heard at scale. The polish and the tools do not erase the humanity. They amplify it, acting as a megaphone to reach the disillusioned listener exactly where they are.
And my conclusion remains that artificial distribution and automated production methods pale in comparison to the essential ingredient of great music. Perkins' resonance isn't a victory of algorithms or academic engineering. It is a testament to an uncompromising, flawed human soul refusing to take shortcuts.
Even if it makes the process harder.
Exactly. The raw vulnerability, the explicit rejection of pleasing the masses with conventional Christian music tropes, and the insistence on human-made art are what actually save the music. Without that beating human heart at the center, the most perfectly engineered song is just empty noise.
It is clear that we share a deep appreciation for Perkins as a fascinating case study. He truly sits at the exact intersection where classical roots meet modern indie rock and where deep spiritual theology meets the digital age. We obviously have continued disagreement on whether rejecting technological evolution, specifically regarding AI in his 2026 album, is a sustainable long-term strategy for an independent artist.
We do. And I think that unresolved tension, much like the music itself, is exactly what makes his upcoming work so highly anticipated.
Absolutely. It leaves us with a compelling question about the nature of creation itself. Do the tools an artist uses fundamentally change the soul they pour into the work? We encourage all of you to explore Burning Heart for yourselves, listen to the nuances of the production we've discussed today, and keep an eye out for Perkins' full-length album in 2026.
Definitely worth a listen.
See exactly how this balance between human frailty and structural polish plays out in the music itself. Are we looking at a master architect mathematically constructing a beautiful illusion using modern tools, or are we simply witnessing a raw, unfiltered human heart catching fire? That is something you will have to decide for yourself.
Thank you for listening to Discover You Radio's discussions. We'd like to invite you to research the artist who is spotlighted on this episode and add them to your playlist. If they have a website, join their mailing list. You never know. They just may become the next legendary legacy through Discover You Radio. Because listeners like you made it possible. Thank you for your support.